Hello, and welcome to Semantic Reactions, the official podcast of the Institute of General Semantics. My name is Ben Hauk, and I'm pleased to be able to introduce the 18th episode in our ongoing series. As you may recall, our previous episode featured an interview with singer-songwriter and activist Michelle Schacht in conversation with IGS trustees Lance Straight and Tom Gencarelli. It turned out that they had so much to talk about that they decided that they would pause the interview so that Michelle had time to play a couple of songs for us and continue the conversation in the next episode. And so, for our February 2024 episode, we return to Randy Hudson's VoxPod New York City studio, where the recording was once again engineered by Ben Connors, and our intrepid trio will pick up the discussion where they left off last time. If you haven't heard our previous episode, you may want to listen to that one first. Otherwise, hold on for a wild ride and a warning that there's a little bit of salty language in this one, as Michelle Schacht talks about her career and her music and closes out the podcast once more with two of her songs.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Semantic Reactions, the official podcast of the Institute of General Semantics. My name is Lance Straight. I'm back here with Tom Gencarelli and with our special guest, Michelle Schacht, ready to continue part 2, our second episode in a row, where we're interviewing and talking with Michelle. Welcome back, Michelle.
Part 2, I thought this was going to be a takeover. It's the Michelle Schacht Semantic Reaction.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back with you guys.
Yes, we're retitling this the Schacht Reactions, which, well, we'll get to that, but...
Tune in next week and every week.
Yes, but for now, we're going to pick up. I mean, we left off actually in a very interesting place in the conversation where, Michelle, you had brought up the incident in San Francisco where, as you put it, you used the words crucified and canceled. So would you like to tell us a bit about what happened that evening?
I was starting my 2013 tour. This was the 4th in a series of 5 tours that had started in 2009, if I'm doing my math right, where I would play basically 80 shows a year, and I had divided it up by 10 shows in March, 10 shows in April, 10 shows in May, and then take the summer off. So this was the first night of the first show in March, and it was going to be going all the way through the year. I had the whole year routed. And the previous year, I had invited on stage in each of the places I was performing local activists who had stood up to what at the time was the mass foreclosure fraud with no prosecutions of the banks. And local activists would come up on stage and just share with my audience their story of how they organized their community to come together and resist the evictions. So I noticed at the end of 2012's tour, some odd things were going on where people were showing up that were in my audience, but they weren't my audience. They would have strange reactions to things that I said, and I'm a pretty well-known brand by this point, you know? And it culminated in November of 2012. I was in Asheville, North Carolina, and I just asked a very simple question. I said, why did President Obama at the time, right, promise to protect whistleblowers, but here is Manning, at the time it was Bradley Manning, in solitary confinement? And about 20 people got up and walked out. And I remembered thinking, how odd. I mean, this is a Michelle Schacht show. If anything, 20 people should be walking in, you know? Yeah. But 3 days later, I was in Tampa, Florida, doing the same thing. I called the tour that year Rockupy. And
Rockupy, like rock?
Rocky
Okay.
Pie. And the next day, as I have to do every week, I go on YouTube to see if anyone's uploaded bootlegs. And this woman had uploaded a clip. It's still on YouTube, but it's been made private. And the clip said, "This is all I got," before she asked us not to record, right? So let's review. The bootlegger knew that I didn't want it recorded. They uploaded it anyway, and when I sent a takedown notice to YouTube, they informed me that at that point in the show, I was not yet performing copyrighted protected material, that I was only talking. So let's review. If I don't own my words, who does? Google?
Well, and just back up for a second. When you said people are showing up at your shows, that they are not there for your music, but they're there because you're talking about stuff and that's what they're interested in. That's why they're showing up.
My speculation, we can kind of compare notes later, is that I was a convenient draw for a polarized crowd that wanted to come to hate. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you think you put on a concert because people love you, but because of social media, something had changed. And I remember in our last episode, I was saying I thought it was Twitter, and I also think it's YouTube, and I also think it's Wikipedia. But now I'm taking you to the last show that I played in 2012 before the first night of my 2013 tour. And so when YouTube refused to take this content down because it wasn't copyright protected, the light bulb went off over my head. Okay, this is what it's come to. I don't own my words. Google does. And they can purpose my words in any manner they wish. More importantly, what happened to my Miranda rights? And third is that if I don't have the ability to choose when or where someone publishes my performance, I'm basically a slave. I no longer own anything about my identity, my persona, whatever. I took it that way. Now, a lot of people are much more broad-minded and say, help yourself to my words, my identity, whatever. It's all public domain. I happen to think that what I was doing was building on 25 plus years of brand equity to be able to stand and speak my truth and not have someone put words in my mouth. So now let's go to the first night of my 2013 concert. This year the theme was celebrating 25 years of Short, Sharp, Shocked. It was the 25th anniversary of my signature album, Short, Sharp, Shocked, my most popular, acclaimed album. And so I went on stage and I played every single song from the album in sequence because I knew that there would be bootleggers in the audience. My most popular album? Are you kidding me? You don't think I knew people weren't going to be in the audience bootlegging my copyright protected intellectual property? I knew it.
Right.
So that makes the following story all the more of what I was hoping would be a rush to curiosity rather than a rush to judgment. Unfortunately, that did not eventuate. What eventuated was a bootleg uploaded to YouTube, not of the concert, not of the copyright protected material, the talking, not the singing that followed when I came back out on stage for the encore, standing ovation. And so I call it my epic exploit, because what I needed to do was figure out in a Rube Goldberg kind of way how to make everyone in the room care as much as I did about my words being stolen. Because the status quo meant as long as I was the only one who cared about my words being stolen, well, it was not going to stop.
Right.
So that's like a lot to unpack, but it gives you a glimpse into how an artist's creative problem solving brought us to what was an epic exploit and basically got me canceled for hate speech.
For audience who obviously haven't heard this bootleg, it seemed like a part of it, at least, is you reading from your Twitter feed.
That was the construction. So
Yeah.
when the audience first came into the venue, it was called Yoshi's. It's a jazz club in San Francisco. When they walked in, before the show started, what they saw on stage were 3 portraits. One on the left of Georgia O'Keeffe, one in the center of me, and my Twitter handle, and below me, the word balloon. Join the conversation. and on the right was a portrait of Frida Kahlo. So when I walked out on stage to begin the concert, I turned the first portrait of Georgia O'Keeffe around. And on the back of the portrait was, in like 6-foot-tall letters, the word truth. And then I turned the portrait of me around, and on the back of my portrait were, in 6-foot-tall letters, the word verses. And when I turned the portrait of Frida Kahlo around, on the back of her portrait was the word reality. So in my performance art concept, this was the frame. And I know that in general semantics, we have a very clear appreciation for the frame or the architecture of language and the meta meanings that take place before a single word, or in my case, song, is ever performed.
Well, absolutely. And within general semantics, and the operative term would be reality, that there is reality out there, but that we take it in different ways. And so what people claim to be the truth has to be subject to empirical investigation and fact-checking. And we always have to be open to error, to the fact that we're mistaken about what we think the truth is.
All else is a construct, right?
That's why I love you guys. I love you guys. And remember in the last episode, I was explaining that it was Abby Hoffman who brought me to Marshall McLuhan. Mm-hmm. And so all of that influence was very much part of the conception. It was a performance art conception, and even Lenny Bruce worked his way into the act that night. It was Abby Hoffman who said, "Free speech means the right to shout theater into a crowded fire."
That is so Abby Hoffman, too.
That was what my intention was that night. I came to shout theater into a crowded fire, that the audience had not yet realized or understood the implications of what this theft of my words, of my free speech rights, of my personhood, of Citizens United, of our, faltering they had not yet realized how complicit they were in the dismantling of the ability to have a moment on stage to say, I think there's a problem, and I'd like to demonstrate it for you. Mm-hmm. So these were my intentions, but...
So we're talking about a kind of experiment in a way.
I think
testing reality.
I think it's generous as long as you can appreciate that I knew that not only was there a meta conversation going on above my head concerning my legacy as a recording artist and the perceptions of my persona, including my sexual identity, there was also underneath it a lot of known unknowns, like the fact that I own all of my intellectual property and that I was poised in a situation where, it's like I remember, that's too long a story, where I was in a position that if anybody was going to shoot a hole in my boat, it would be better if I did it, right? Because I could own the consequences of it. So here, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Even though you've limbed for us the construction of reality, when I framed it as truth versus reality, I knew that there was a meta conversation in the audience about, I hear she's a born-again Christian and, she's a fundamentalist. But I was approaching it more like the way people on Twitter get hypnotized by manufactured events, and they don't even realize they're participating in it. Because this was my thought process. Truth and reality, they're really the same thing. Shh, don't tell anyone. But I believed fervently that something had happened to bifurcate, to divide, to disambiguate, so that you could now have reality and you could have truth. And how I came to that conclusion was because I have two very different communities that I'm a part of, right? So my radical activist community, I was hearing feedback from the LGBT community that these religious fundamentalists were getting so uppity and getting, on school boards and stuff like that, that they were going to form concentration camps. And they were going to put all of the LGBTQ people into concentration camps. Meanwhile, I'm attending Bible study and choir rehearsals in my faith community, and what I'm hearing is these LGBTQ activists are getting so uppity that they're organizing politically to put all Christian people into concentration camps. Now, in 2011, in 2012, in 2013, the word concentration camp did not escape my notice. What are you talking about?
And it's, speaking as a child of Holocaust survivors, it's just so incredibly offensive the way people just play around with these kind of accusations, of this one side or another being not Nazis, where there is no comparison to what they're doing, let alone what even anyone is talking about. So,
I know that your audience knows you, loves you, and respects you for everything that you represent.
Well, I couldn't say that. We're not even sure who's listening.
Let's just go with it. Let's just go with
Especially
it.
because we talked about people listening 100 years from now last time.
We don't even know who's listening to this,
But Lance,
Yeah.
the offensiveness of concentration camp to a child of Holocaust survivors is certainly one meta layer of, what do we call this, truth, reality? I don't care. My point is, it wasn't until the revelations of 2016 and Cambridge Analytica that revealed the fact that, in fact, we had been herded into concentrations based on a series of 5 personality profile types, OCEAN. If you remember the revelations of Cambridge Analytica, this disclosed how Facebook profiles were harvested and then later exploited. So that you had, for example, a community in Wales who had historically, hundreds of years, voted progressive, and with just a few automations of an algorithm, voted in support of Brexit.
Right.
This is what concentration and the targeted advertising that we're going to refer to as camps. And no one was offended by this until suddenly you've got the orange bobble-headed clown running the White House. And then suddenly it's like, this is an outrage. How did this happen?
Right. And we certainly know quite well, and I think across the political spectrum, about how the social media companies are kind of benefiting from and encouraging polarization and this kind of anger at the other side of
And
in
in a way,
politics.
in a way, using and being used at the same time, right?
Always.
Yeah.
Well, brothers, not on my watch. I am nothing if not an equal opportunity offender. I can piss off both sides at once.
God bless. So let's go back to the story then. So you are part of two different communities and seeing how they are both mirroring each other in that sense, in an almost kind of being fed a paranoid delusion about the other side that is stoking extremist views.
Yes, if I could have said it like that in 2013, I certainly would have. But what I brought to the table was a creativity that was based on going back to, say, 2008 or 9, when George W. Bush dragged us kicking and screaming. 2003, yeah, into the war in Iraq. And I came out swinging. I was in Colorado Springs. And I came out on stage and I said, Bush ought to pull out like his daddy should have. I thought it was funny. But the promoter during the intermission came backstage and told me that I had caused offense and that I would now need to go out and to apologize, because I didn't appreciate that in the meta-narrative, Colorado Springs is one of the biggest military installations in the country. And they had just come for a night of entertainment.
NORAD.
It's also a big fundamentalist community.
Yes, the
over
moral
there.
majority. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I actually have been to Colorado Springs.
okay, well, where were you when I needed you? I go out on stage and I go, apparently I have caused offense. So let us pray. Asking forgiveness from both communities, the radical community that I identify with, that believes that this war is a travesty of travesties, and that the military community that I was raised in, that I grew up in, has a culture war of its own, where it believes that its faithfulness to America's manifest destiny means being faithful to how the fundamentalists are like, to God's mission and purpose for America. And now you got all these LGBT people, say, hey, we got rights too. So I was in the crosshairs of that, and that's why that Manning comment in Asheville a few nights before the last night of my imminent demise was so relevant. So I've been an equal opportunity offender for many, many years, and it should not have been. And I wanted you guys to hear the bootleg, to hear the laughter, because my audience, I think that should have been one of the biggest surprises. My audience will suspend outrage, they'll suspend offensiveness to go, is she saying what I think she's saying? I'm not sure what she's saying here. And they'll give me the benefit of the doubt. But there was one heckler that night who was like, that is the most, the most offensive thing I've ever heard. Everyone should get up and walk out. And in fact, it was reported in the news that everyone did, in fact, get up and walk out. But that's not what happened.
By the way, since we haven't mentioned it, the offensive thing that you said.
No, I thought we did. Last episode?
We didn't get to it.
Yeah. Lance referred to it. But
So the charge for my cancellation was that I engaged in hate speech.
Right.
that I took a Fred Phelps aphorism and I deployed it against a very unsuspecting audience. But that's not what I did. What I did was I told the audience to tweet
Tweet it.
that I had said it, and I never said it. And they never tweeted it. So, in a meta general semantic sense, I was canceled for something that they never said that I never said. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
With a frame behind me the whole time that you wouldn't hear from the audio bootleg. Truth versus reality.
Right.
I think I managed to start a fire that night. And a lot of people want to suggest that I was the only one that got burned.
So, just to clarify, in that statement was that God hates homosexuals.
No, I didn't say God hates homosexuals.
But that was the quote that was.
Nope.
Tweet that Michelle said
Right.
was the beginning of the quote.
Right.
Would someone please be so gracious as to say that Michelle Schock just said on stage? Can I get a volunteer to say what I asked them to tweet?
Yeah, I could say it. That Michelle Schock hates.
No, God.
No, that Michelle Schock said that God hates. Can I bring myself to say the word?
Okay, so here's the funny thing. We can all, let's do a round robin here. I'll say it first and you'll say it. Bitch.
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 Yay, all right. Now, that word is a slur against
It is.
women.
Yes, it is.
But
Yeah.
it is successful. None of us are going to go there and say the N word.
Right.
Exactly.
But you ain't no woman, and you'll say it. You'll say bitch, because that is the bottom of the barrel. You can call a woman a bitch all freaking day long, and you'll be joining a line a mile long. So, when we're talking about hate speech, when we're talking about offensive slurs, the fact that none of us in this context are comfortable using the word that I said on stage, I'll tell you why. Because we're being recorded. This recording is going to remain in the ether long after we leave this room and after Ben hopefully edits this down to a sensible length. But I knew when I was on stage.
By the way, there was a whole South Park episode about that word. And
I'm sorry, I missed it.
yeah, where the kids are using it without knowing its meaning. It's the F word, F-A-G-S. So I mean,
The British cigarette. reference.
yes,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
and they're using it, but they're referring to these guys on motorcycles and calling them that. And when they're told that it's offensive, they're saying, why should it refer to homosexuals? It does, that homosexuals are perfectly fine for them, and they're just using it as a derogatory term against guys revving their motorcycle engines and thinking they're cool. And that's fair, and you mentioned Lenny Bruce, and that is so much of a general semantics point that it's not the word, that we shouldn't react to the word, and of course we make concessions to, popular sentiment, which is why we won't use the N word, but that we shouldn't be reacting to words in this way, because we give them the power. The power isn't in the word; it's in what we give to them. And we had a session. We did a panel discussion a couple of years ago with John McWhorter about, and it was about his book 9 Nasty Words, and in reference, and we were talking about the N word, and if he, being African American, felt free to use it, whereas I did not.
And then we talked about the difference between the ER ending and the A ending.
But he made a really good point that people lose the sense of making a reference, as opposed to actually using the word. To refer to the word is kind of on a meta level. You're not calling somebody that word. You're talking about the word as a word. But that's a kind of subtlety and nuance that is completely lost.
That's the N word, nuance.
Yes, it's lost, right? You can't do that because people don't see the context. They don't see the shades of meaning and the different levels of abstracting. And they just react to the word and we call that a signal reaction, which is a knee-jerk, unreflective reflex reaction to the word as if it were a thing out there.
So I can say concentration camps now?
You can, and I can say that I find using that word, I'm not offended that the word is used. I mean, it is a perfectly fine term to use. I just find it's the overuse of that and other Nazi references to talk about something other than real concentration camps and death camps, which were very, they were a real thing, and they were, it's clearly established historically, and then to start to talk about other kinds of things, or even to say that one group wants to do this to another.
The Japanese Americans were put into internment camps in California, right?
Right. Now, we could argue the nuances there about that, because that could qualify as a concentration camp. But to say that whatever Christians want to put gays into concentration camp, or gays want to put Christians into concentration camps, that's where it's like, come on.
So,
the same thing. I'm just, when they said that George W. Bush is a Nazi, I mean, come on. That's where we have to be more clear and more discerning in our use of language.
In context.
Well, I wish I could play back right now how we got to your very succinct and articulate phrasings of what my creative concept was. But you have now a pretty general outline of what my motivation was and what my intention was. What I am objecting to is the criticism regarding my execution of my concept. Everyone suddenly became an art critic because it turned out that I made everyone in that room care about my show being bootlegged as much as I did. Everyone cared, and they didn't like it. They did not like the results.
And that was the point.
And yet people now say you are no longer allowed to be engaged, to be employed as an artist, because you succeeded beyond any of our wildest expectations. So we have a problem, Houston.
So to go back, right, you own all of your own intellectual property rights with respect to the recordings. And in the deep past of your career, there were people who would sneak in a little cassette machine to make bootlegs, but those bootlegs got spread around the way we used to talk about fanzines and, in the mail and things like that. And then suddenly we have social media. And suddenly the idea of a bootleg is instantly spread internationally to as big an audience as can possibly access it.
Plus, just to add to that is the digital medium, so that, if you make a copy of a cassette tape, you lose a lot of quality. And you make that's why nobody really went after us for making mixtapes back when we were kids, or we were young. But, and you make a copy of that copy and you lose even more quality. You can't go more than, it just becomes unlistenable after a couple of generations. Whereas when it's in digital form, you make a perfect copy that is no different from the original. And that's where things really get problematic for
But if
copying.
I add one more step in that evolution, and then we add what we refer to as social media, and suddenly everyone has a platform to talk about things as though they're take on it, their construction of truth, their construction of reality, carries some weight that people are going to care, to listen, that they're going to influence, to talk about what influencers are. Add that to the internet and its 3 billion different existing sites, and we have an environment in which the crucifixion happens.
That was why I was surprised when shortly after the bootleg recording of the encore, which I later learned was uploaded to YouTube by an employee of YouTube, resulted in an open letter published in the Huffington Post by a Korean-American comedian named Margaret Cho.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Margaret Cho? I've never met or spoke to her. And Margaret Cho wrote this open letter about how deeply hurt she was by my words, and then went on to deconstruct my signature song, Anchorage, which you and I will be performing at the Players Club in Gramercy Park on February 15th. Wahoo! But Margaret
2024
Cho,
for those of you listening in the future.
And so we'll have performed by then.
well, I performed it last century. Y'all missed it.
I didn't.
Margaret Cho was explaining to the entire world, including me for the first time, that my song Anchorage, about writing a friend who I wrote to her in Dallas, but she had moved to Anchorage with her husband and her son, and now had a new little baby girl, was in fact a secret lesbian love letter. And that my words on stage in San Francisco had shattered her illusion about my inclusionary secret messaging to lesbians. Now, I don't know what you think of the comedy of Margaret Cho, but I don't necessarily have an opinion. I can tell you what I think of Margaret Cho as a music critic. That bitch need to get the fuck out of my... So this open letter went viral and helped to fuel further backlash, and it just became this exponential, and over all the noise, and I'm the only one in this room that's been canceled, so I'm going to tell you firsthand what happens. There is one sound that cuts through all the noise, and that sound is a demand to apologize. And what you start looking at as the scorched earth in front of you begins to, go up in smoke and flames is like, these people don't want an apology. They don't want an apology. They want a demon that they can demonize, because we talk a lot about homophobia, but it's kind of hard to give me an example of a genuine, bona fide homophobe. Everyone's like, I'm not homophobic, but, like that's how they do it. And I'm like, I said, not only am I a homophobe, I am the world's greatest homophobe. So I don't know if Lenny Bruce can get his head around that one, but that was what I offered as a sacrifice on the altar of my own 25-year reputation as a activist, as a social justice activist. I would have hoped I would have gotten at least one giggle, but no, the overwhelming roar, other than silence, absolute silence from our friends, is the demand from all of our accusers. You need to apologize.
And just to be clear, when you said you're the world's greatest homophobe, that was sarcastic.
Can you hear the sarcasm? Can you hear it dripping?
I can.
Oh, good.
But I'm not sure that it's conveyed in the recording, and that's where I just want to that's why, and this is exactly what we're talking about here. And it really is a form of abstracting again for our general semantics folks, because abstracting isn't just about language or perception, but when you take things out there in the reality and then you represent them through various media, you're taking them out of context, you're losing again all the nuance. Even in a sound recording, we don't get the full sense of facial expressions and some of the tone of voice is lost. So it's really important for us to make sure that we're clear about what's being conveyed here. But I just want to say, and this also speaks to the fact of public image, that you are abstracted out of your reality, that you exist as a person, living your life. And, for someone like me and Tom, we're mostly not public personas, maybe just slightly, but, for the most part not. So it doesn't really come up for us. But for someone, you referred to yourself last time as an accidental celebrity. So there is this abstracting going on where there's this image of you that's not you. It's just pulled out of you very selectively and very partially, and that becomes what people know, and then they think they know who you are.
If I can just add this too, I asked Lance before for the reference, because he's usually pretty good at remembering exactly the page that something was written on, much less the author.
Not as good as I used to be.
Who was it who said that the problem with language as our currency for, when we're thinking about talking about what is meaning, it's not that it's so hard to be understood, but it's hard to not be misunderstood.
Say that again. It's hard to be not misunderstood?
It's hard to not be misunderstood. That we're trying to craft our language so much, not so that we're understood, but so that we're not misunderstood.
I get it now. So, Lance, you're 3 for 3 at this point, and
That's called a strikeout, by the way.
No, you're 3 for 3.
No, you're batting 1,000.
You have very succinctly articulated motivation and intention in such a way that I can basically just take a deep breath and say my work here is done. But I think in some ways it's not just how you articulate it, not what you articulate, but how you have a demeanor. You have a very carefully disciplined and practiced meditation so that the way you say things communicates as much as what you say. And it brings so much peace and comfort to your listeners to feel like they understand you and they understand themselves a little better. That's how I'm feeling right now, because what I want to say for your last point is that what people got from the misunderstanding of that exploit, they could not have gotten if I had gone up on stage and said, please do not record this performance. And if you'll do that for me, I'll make sure that this is a performance worth recording. And the reason is because I have dedicated, just like you have dedicated your life to this excellence in communication, I have dedicated my life to the development of my gift, which I consider to be a charisma, which is a persona, a presence that when I walk on stage, I'm no longer myself. So that projection that you were talking about, it's palpable, but it's not me. I'm part of it, but it's not me. And that's what I've built my art practice on. And so I believe in the sacredness of the live performance, and I was not going to allow it to be destroyed without putting up a fight. So thank you once again for at least helping your listeners to appreciate at least how I thought I got to my epic exploit.
Now, you brought up Margaret Cho, and I want to extend the invitation to her to come on Semantic Reaction.
Come on, bitch!
and talk to us about this. But, to maybe get back to that accidental celebrity, how did she wind up with this misunderstanding then of yourself? I know that, private life is supposed to stay private, but when you become a celebrity, that gets lost in the shuffle. How did people get this sort of impression about you?
I'm going to try to land this plane, and by now experience has taught me that you guys are actually going to be the pilot and co-pilot, and I'm going to end up being the sack of potatoes in between you, okay? So here's how we're going to roll.
Or the bombardier.
Save the bombardier.
Work with that metaphor of the sack of potatoes in between the pilot and the co-pilot.
It was actually Amelia Earhart who was the first woman to fly on a transatlantic flight. But her husband was a publicist, and she actually didn't fly the plane. She sat between the two guys that flew the plane and felt like her celebrity she was the first female celebrity, and she felt like her celebrity was unearned. So she took greater and greater risks to try to earn her celebrity. So by the time we're done, I'm going to be the sack of potatoes between two excellent pilots. But the point I want to get to is Wikipedia. So you can follow my logic, and I'm not going to ask you to agree. But I believe that Wikipedia functions in a way that we have not yet begun to see the effects of. To us, it appears to be just like a digital encyclopedia. You could have a bunch of encyclopedias on your bookshelf, or you could just summon Wikipedia on your computer. I do not believe that that's Wikipedia's actual role. So I've intimated previously that every reputation has a value. Just like Facebook recently was exposed for assigning each 13-year-old a value of $270 for getting them onto the platform and addicting them to social media. They have somewhere assigned a value to every person's reputation. So I'm going to shift this point laterally to AI. I'm going to shift it to name, image, and likeness. I'm going to shift it to virtual reality, and I'm going to shift it to personas. Now, with all that said, I'm going to do a nosedive. We're going down, and y'all got to pull us out of this and back to Margaret Cho by saying that I think there is a virtual Michelle Schacht. I've never met her. I've never talked to her. I've never had any encounters with her, but I think Margaret Cho did. And I think the Michelle Schacht that Margaret Cho encountered was a closet lesbian. I sincerely believe that because she was so convincing in her performance of moral indignation and outrage that who was I to inform her, Margaret Cho, I really, 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 really like dick.
And you wrote the song and know what you wrote the song about.
I think I would have some credibility, but what I learned about Wikipedia early on, as it used citations that were taken out of context to create a segment of my Wikipedia profile titled Sexuality. And Wikipedia informed the world she's a lesbian. And I would say, excuse me, Wikipedia, but I think there's been some mistake here. And Wikipedia consistently over and over and over again would reply to me, "You, Michelle Schacht, are not a sufficient authority on your Wikipedia biography because you're too close to the subject."
Well, I do know that their policy is not to let, whoever the entry is about, not to let them edit their own entry. You need someone else to do that. But
Which is often easy to find
yeah,
and
but
to influence.
Or manufacture.
Yeah,
sure.
You
Oh, yeah,
just hire someone to write an article, they publish it, and suddenly you've got a citation.
Right.
That's how Wikipedia works. So what's going on?
But if we could ask, that idea didn't start with Wikipedia, did it?
I'm going to argue that much like I'm hearing rumblings, okay, discount my sources, but there's a guy in the UK who worked deep in the defense industry who raised this point that Microsoft's AI operation has been a 25-year long game. And we're just now seeing the tip of that iceberg, but we don't actually know what's underneath it. My suspicion, and y'all can get me off this woo-woo train because we got to get back on the reality plane. I think Wikipedia has a function in this greater economy that I can't articulate, but I bet you guys can.
But, just as far as your celebrity image, and you kind of burst on the scene back at a time when you were associated with some other singer-songwriters.
I made a joke. So by now, it's pretty evident that I'm not only the world's lousiest evangelist, but I also have a very wry sense of humor. And so when I won this award in 1987, Best New Artist at CMJ, there were 4 other artists who were nominated, and they were all female. And I had noted that there was speculation and rumor and scuttlebutt about their sexuality. And at the time, I don't know if your listeners will remember this, but there was a hip, cool indie band called They Might Be Giants.
Oh, yeah.
So
They were funny.
So they were funny, right?
What is CMJ, by the way?
College Music Journal.
Okay. So I don't think everyone would know that.
Especially not in 23, 24 when they're listening to this.
And among the general semantics audience, yeah.
Okay, but now let's go back.
Yeah.
Last year, I was very, very honored to receive the Media Ecology Association's Jack Ellul Award for media activism. And do you remember my acceptance speech? What did I say?
I'd rather hear you say it.
I said, I've won a Grammy, but this is better. And so
which is the best,
right? The best
commercial you could
acceptance
possibly
speech
do.
the MEA has ever had.
I'm telling you. So when I received this Best New Artist Award, I got up and I accepted it by saying, they should have called this award They Might Be Lesbians. Ha, 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 ha. And the audience laughed just like you heard the Yoshi's audience laughing because it's damn funny. And I don't know, maybe I should be a comedy critic and share some of these tips with Margaret Cho because nothing she said has ever made me laugh. But let's get back to the point. At hand.
Margaret, are you listening?
Again, Margaret Cho, we invite you to come on Semantic Reactions to rebut any of this.
Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so
We're waiting.
she does have a song called My Fat Pussy. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Wait, Margaret Cho has a song?
She is a wannabe singer-songwriter. So
The plot thickens.
Yes.
you'd think
yes.
so. You'd think so, but no.
Is it jealousy
Let's go back
or
to
envy?
Wikipedia. Let's go back to
Just-
Reputation. Let's go
Yeah.
back to my woo-woo nosedive, taking the plane down.
So, my thought about Wikipedia is that Wikipedia is an experiment because the internet allowed it, and the idea on top of encyclopedias is that instead of having experts and a single person tasked to write an entry, now we can have the group mind, the hive mind, write an entry. And in creating this, they create a set of rules, which again does not allow you, because you're too close to yourself, which one would hope that you're really close to yourself, but you as close to yourself are not qualified to influence that entry. That's part of the rules. So whether the rules work or not, here's an experiment gone to the degree it's gone, and we're just letting it live because it's there, and they've funded themselves however they have. They always ask me for money every time I look at an entry.
They're funded by piracy, but carry on.
No. Actually, I'd love you to carry on. They're funded by piracy. How? What
Okay,
do you
I
mean?
want to make a larger point. Remember when I asked the question right before my cancellation, if I don't own my words, who does? Mm-hmm. And if Google owns my words, what does that make me? So I happen to believe that I'm sitting here with two very astute media scholars who still, somehow, it has escaped their attention that open source as an ideology is the means by which your captivity, your capture, will be affected in the same way that what Citizens United did by declaring that money is speech undermined our civil liberties, and it's still playing out in a very, very long game. So now you're starting to see how my Rube Goldberg mind works when it comes to how an open source, innocuous, send us money so that we can keep telling lies. And you won't notice the boiling pot that all you frogs are in, because right now it's just celebrities. But I'm going to tell you this, there's tech bros in Silicon Valley who hire people to write articles about their girlfriend's dogs because they want to get Wikipedia entries for their dogs. Dogecoin, anyone?
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think there was, at least in the earlier iteration of the internet, there were people who were fairly idealistic and unrealistic, and a lot of it was very California, as our old professor Neil Postman would put it. This sort of hippie kind of quality of that went to it. But I will tell you, Michelle, I know you will probably appreciate this, and if you want, you can use it as well. One time in conversation with someone who was like really boosting the internet, and back when open source suddenly became this big buzzword, I made a little joke about, is it open source or open source? S-O-R-E-S.
I'm 20 years behind you, brother, but I got that joke too.
Yeah. So, and that's that it's never one way or another. There's always going to be a cost for every benefit that some innovation brings.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, but it's a system of control. You're absolutely true. And, with respect to the offshoot of general semantics that we refer to as media ecology, I often talk about what media ecology is as a part of trying to bring a media education, to use the title of McLuhan's book, to get people to understand media. And understanding media is understanding the nature of the internet, understanding social media. It's understanding the nature of the various platforms and apps that are there, like Wikipedia. And it's about understanding the industrial forces and who is in power and making money from our capture, as you put it, from the fact that we're in the camp.
I love you guys. I love you guys so much. Yes, all of that. And the idea that technology is developed and funded by the military, privatized without any public debate, and then turned into a profit-generating source of revenue for the nation state, leaves us as mere collateral damage of a weapon that was never designed to support or sustain human life or human thriving. And I think that's a valid artistic statement, you know? Sorry, I do. I think that's kind of a good thing to get up on stage and say, wake up, idiots.
Yeah, we talk about our media environment, our media culture. That is it, what you just said.
Well, I've been silenced, so someone else is going to have to take the baton for now.
Well, and I think, what your position is very much in keeping with someone like Jacques Ellul, for whom the Activism Award is named for, who talked about how technology is destroying, and when he's talking about it not in terms of machines, but the way that we ourselves are technologized and given over to technical thinking and technical approaches, and that destroys what it means to be human and the very idea of the sacred, of nature, of us as biological beings.
As what we're doing in this room right now.
And organic,
I'm telling you, I love you guys. I love you guys.
Well, I think there's room for different positions, and I'll just say, especially in media ecology, because, there are some folks who think that technology is on some positive force, and but the bottom line for us is how do we maximize the benefits, and how do we minimize the cost? How do we figure out what we should and should not do? And that's the real trick, is to, that we let it control us instead of taking control ourselves over what's going on.
Yeah, our friend and colleague Doug Rushkoff, his little book, Program or Be Programmed, right? I've always said he's not telling us that we need to learn to code, but that we need to learn to take over the programming of our lives and try to program our own lives.
And Nora Bateson's excellent observations about warm data, that what we've been doing here in this room gets translated into little ones and zeros that get streamed across some podcasts, but that doesn't take away the hearts and bones of what you guys have allowed me to do today, which was to take a voice of dissent, an awesome voice of dissent that has been silenced, and turn it into the mycelial, fungal nurturing of someone who might hear this episode soon enough to come on February 15, 2024, or 2 centuries from now when they go, I wonder what happened to that civilization.
And it's so nice that you mentioned Nora Bateson, because, warm data, the whole point is that, when we think of data, it's everything is reduced to numbers, which is how you calculate efficiency, which is the technological imperative. And to counter that, counter cold, hard numbers is to think about warm, soft organics, and ourselves as biological beings in an environment as part of an ecological system. And I'll add that she's dealing just recently, this has come up where a book was recently released that completely mischaracterizes her father, Gregory Bateson, and along with his one-time spouse, Margaret Mead, and just takes little bits and pieces out of context and turns them into drug pushers who were spearheading LSD experimentation
with
for the
CIA.
CIA.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like this, and this is like a history professor who is supposed to be able to provide a factual account, and in fact has just kind of connected disparate pieces and through insinuation and all of that, and turned it into something kind of produced out of whole cloth. So, and she's dealing, with that sort of thing. And it's sort of interesting because Margaret Mead, was a public figure and has had stuff come out about her, but Gregory Bateson, not so much. So, one of the concerns is, well, what is going to get picked up by AI? What is it that when people look at, about Gregory Bateson, what are they going to be exposed to? Will it be his brilliant ideas, his insights and explorations, or will it be this sort of like gossipy, kind of
Prurience.
Yeah.
Prurience.
yeah, which a lot of that is, it's all, the affair and all of this kind of stuff. And, and that's, it's very harmful and it's very upsetting for the people involved.
Because we're, flesh and blood. The woman who was crucified is resurrected here, and that was my ace in the hole, is that on that meta level where that scuttlebutt, that rumor mongering, well, the reason she's a closet lesbian is because her faith community would reject her. I was aware of that, but it had never been to my face. So I was just going to prove to the whole world that, you can't keep a good woman down. But more importantly, that if my faith has any purpose or meaning to it at all, I needed to be able to stand on it as I watched everything that I had worked for 25 years to create be destroyed overnight, and still to come back from that. So that's what this concert on February 15th represents to me. Is I've found my General Semantics tribe. I've found the people who don't rush to misunderstanding, don't rush to offense, but take this deliberate time to break down semantic reactions, to really try and understand. You might be one of us, you look like an odd duck, but you might be one of us, and to embrace me. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for the welcome and fellowship, and I hope we can extend it to all of our other fellow time binders.
Well, that means a lot to us, and maybe this would be a good point to, shift to talking about music a little bit and a couple of things that we didn't get to last time. One being, who are you listening to? Who are you influenced by when it comes to music that, kind of informed your own work as a musician?
The Grateful Dead is my favorite band ever.
No, you're... I know that. That's another sarcastic one.
Dear listeners, Lance is a huge Deadhead. I despise.
I'm not. Actually, he's a huge Yes fan.
Oh, so because of Yes, he likes the Grateful Dead?
No, they were separate.
No, he's a Deadhead. He's a Deadhead.
Well, I mean, to me, the Deadheads are the folks who followed the band around, and
you didn't do that.
I didn't
but you
do
just like
that.
the music. But I've been now to a couple of awesome rehearsals with Tom and his band Blue Raves, and I could hear right away the REM influences. It's an influence, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I actually despise the Grateful Dead, and I play bass in this punk band, and one time. My bass player, the guy whose band it is, Spike, he told me, the reason you hate the Dead is because you can't open for them. But I did. I opened for Bob Weir, so I think I'm qualified when I'm up on stage and I hear those stupid people going, boo. They just... And Bob Weir is singing. Okay, never mind. Enough hating on the Dead. I my father, I think I talked in the last episode about his musical influences being my musical influences. And I hope that tradition survives, where instead of wanting to have the opposite of your parents' musical influences, if they've got good musical taste, you can go, oh, yeah, that's kind of cool. So I would go with him to like bluegrass festivals. And that's pretty much all we got to say about that.
Well, who do you like today?
I like Billie Eilish. I really like Billie Eilish.
Agreed.
I want to like Taylor Swift. I pretty much like Olivia Rodrigo. But mostly I'm listening to punk and hardcore these days. And it's nice because on the local underground scene, I get to have this whole smorgasbord of everything from like screamcore to, metal to all everything in between.
And you're talking about the stuff that's being
It's
made
in the
and
underground.
performed now.
Yeah. In the underground here, right here in New York City, and you'll never hear it because it's like it's got its own mycelial network that.
And that was the other thing I wanted to ask, because you were into the punk scene back when it first started. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
And that's so different from being, from bluegrass and from singer-songwriter, folky kind of stuff.
That can actually take us working backwards to Abby Hoffman, who, in 1968, remember the Yippies in Chicago and all that. But the following election cycle in 72 in Miami, there was a little off-break group that said the Yippies aren't radical enough. They've lost their edge. And so they became the Zippies. And the Zippies were headquartered out of number 9 Bleecker Street, and they published a magazine called Overthrow. And they invested in a sound system that would put on bands at Tompkins Square Park of punk and reggae and hip-hop, because all three of those were like underground genres that were kind of, and punk specifically, political hardcore. And then they took it in 1983 around the country as Rock Against Racism, and then in 1984, which is where I met them, it was called Rock Against Reagan. And so in 1984, I was in San Francisco. Rock Against Reagan came, and they put on a concert, and then we did this protest, and I got arrested, and then we went down with Rock Against Reagan and to Dallas, and were arrested at the Democratic and then the Republican National Convention. And then I drove one of these former Yippies cars to New York, and now I'm staying at number 9 Bleecker Street, and at the end of the street at Bowery is what? CBGB's.
Yeah.
Do you know what CBGB stands for?
Country, bluegrass, and blues.
Ding, 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 ding. So I
lost a good portion of my hearing at CBGB.
And then OMFUG.
And Max's Kansas City.
Other
Other music for...
from the underground.
No, it's for something Gormandizer. I can't remember the U. Oh, my God.
Well, we can
Anyway,
make up our own acronyms. But that Sunday, I drove into New York. There was a riot outside CBGB's because they would have these hardcore matinees for kids, underage that couldn't go into the bar otherwise. And I was, Sheena is a punk rocker. I was a punk rocker, and I played and wrote singer-songwritery influenced stuff, but my culture, my tribe, my scene, because I was a squatter. I had diddly squat. And so I lived in a squat down on 10th between Avenues C and D back when it was like really hardcore. And then I went to Amsterdam and I lived in a squat there. And then I went to Italy, and it was at the time that they had those women's peace camps. So I went to a peace camp in Comiso, which is at the tip of Sicily, which was at the end of World War II supposed to never be militarized, but they had, sure enough, an ballistic cruise missile camp there, and there was a women's peace camp there. So I was squatting and activism and all that stuff, and it was all political hardcore. Punk was, like an offshoot of like Sex Pistols or Ramones. Pop punk, it was more like political activist.
The Clash.
This is great. This is the reason he asked the question, was to get you, I think.
I'm impressed that we
tell
got
us
there,
this,
because
yeah.
I made you drag that out of me,
No, that's
kicking and
great.
screaming.
That's great.
So, Michelle, we've had a really great conversation, but music speaks louder, especially when it's amplified, louder than words, but certainly in very pleasant ways. So I was wondering if you would grace us with a song. And I have to tell you, to our listeners, that I am sitting here in this very joyful moment because Michelle has a funny little instrument. What do you call that again?
Well, some call it a mandolin. I call it a womandolin.
And I guess Tom also has a funny little instrument that he's holding. What would you call that?
And mine is a mandolin too, but for today,
A mandolin too.
Rarely.
Okay.
Make it a mandolin too.
All right.
Rarely, is that a word?
They are going to play a song.
All right, this is a song that I wrote from a traditional melody called Over the Waterfall. So what you're going to hear are three elements: my words, my melody, and the traditional melody, Over the Waterfall. Shall we commence?
Let's try.
2, 3, and... Thought I knew what I was doing. I was wrong. Mistakes I've made and lived to tell. I tell them in a song. I knew a river wide and deep. Her banks were very tall. At one end was a mountain stream. The other was a waterfall, boys. The other was a waterfall. I asked the old man by the river. He did not recall the last attempt to ride a barrel over the waterfall. And the ferry boatman, he did tell me that the chance was very small. None survived who went alive over the waterfall, boys, over the waterfall. So I built myself an oaken barrel, and inside I did crawl. I broke the record, but I broke my back going over the waterfall. And now it's been my luck to live to tell the only tale I can. It don't hurt you when you fall, only when you land, boys, only when you land. The sound of two hands clapping. Thank you.
We clap for ourselves.
That was Tom Gencorelli doing awesome. Back up on the rhythm mandolin, I was playing my
Lead mandolin.
Givens. And
Lead
we're going to be
womandolin.
featuring that song on February 15, 2024 at the Players Club in Gramercy Park. We really hope you guys listening will come down. You'll get the word out, let other folks know, and let's have us a good old
Because
barn
we're
burner.
not recording it.
Yeah, there's no
No
recording.
bootlegs.
No recording at that show. And then I think, if you don't mind, Lance, I am going to impose on recorded technology for a song that is the opening track of an artist rights manifesto actually, called Musical Chairs. And the way the game of musical chairs is typically understood and played is, it's a zero-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
You have more players than you have chairs.
Right.
And at the end of the game, there's two players fighting over one chair. But I say, no, that's not how you actually play the game of musical chairs. What you do is you keep the music going for as long as possible, because when the music ends, the game is really over.
Right.
So this first song is called Como lo digo yo, and it's inspired by a rumba idiom from Cuba, a guaguancó, and it is basically using the Book of Job, which I know you're not a fan of, but you just have to suck it up. And my battle cry against the human consuming maw known as Wikipedia.
Takes away. I am wounded almost to death. Still I will fight with my last breath. Let me hear a rumbero say, como lo digo yo, como lo digo yo. I will tell you who walked the earth, and you who still await your birth, that I was born to victory, to vanquish every enemy, to know my moral rights, their worth. Como lo digo yo, como lo digo yo, como lo digo yo. Shall I return? No less deserved than that I earn. So sing this song when I am old, to warm my soul when it's grown cold. Like Joby knows the way I take when I'm tested. Make no mistake, I shall come forth shining as gold. Como lo digo yo, como lo digo yo, como lo digo yo. ¿Qué? Como lo digo yo. Como lo digo yo.
that was Como Lo Digo Yo. I hope I said it close enough.
Yeah, you said it.
And that brings us to the end of this episode, sadly, in many ways. But I want to say on behalf of myself and on behalf of Tom and on behalf of the Institute of General Semantics, thank you, Michelle Schacht, for these 2 episodes and these lovely performances. And thank you in anticipation for what we're going to be listening to for this once-in-a-lifetime experience that will be treated to this coming Wednesday, February 15th, at the Players. We're very much looking forward to it, and more importantly, looking forward to much more yeah, there's a bit of much more continued interaction, continued compassion and activism and passion, and all of that in the future. So thank you very much.
Really, thanks, Michelle.
I love you guys.
And that's a wrap.
You've been listening to our February 2024 episode of Semantic Reactions, featuring part 2 of an interview with Michelle Schacht. Special thanks to the VoxPod New York City studio, Randy Hudson, and engineer Ben Connors. If you like what you've heard, or even if you haven't, please consider becoming a member of the Institute of General Semantics if you're not one already. In addition to supporting our efforts, IGS members receive an annual subscription to our journal, etc., a review of general semantics, access to our online and in-person events, lectures, and seminars, and discounts on the books and audio-visual materials that we sell. Regular membership is only $50 and half off for students. Your membership and any additional donations you care to make will help to support our offerings and activities as we work to bring a measure of sanity to the world. The Institute of General Semantics is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to research and education on a wide range of topics. They include language and symbols, meaning and perception, communication and representation, media and technology, science and epistemology, creativity, and critical thinking. We are dedicated to making the world a better place through practical strategies for improving our semantic environment, individually and collectively. For more information about the Institute and our activities, and to become a member and supporter of our work, please visit our website at generalsemantics.org. That's generalsemantics, one word, .org. And this brings to a close our 18th episode of Semantic Reactions, the official podcast of the Institute of General Semantics. This is Ben Houck, signing off, saying, we hope you'll join us next time. And until then, just remember this simple fact, that the map is not the territory.